Hey there guys, what's going on? Sloppy here, and today I want to talk to you guys about Gigantic. I've been playing it for about 6 hours over the past few days, and I wanted to give you my first impressions, sort of my review of the game. The game came out July 20th, so about a week ago. It's a free-to-play strategic hero shooter. Where have you heard that before? Yeah, it's another team-based hero shooter, but it's a bit different than the other ones in the genre. We'll talk about that in a second. It's Unreal Engine 3, and it's actually free-to-play on Windows and Xbox One. It's on Steam, it's on the Windows Store, it's also on something called Arc. I don't know what that is. It's a game that's been in development a long time. I remember seeing trailers of it 4 or 5 years ago. They actually had a beta in August of 2015. It's gone through a few different changes, I guess, since then, but it's finally out. And I gotta say, it's very smooth, and it's a lot of fun. And it's a really, it's a good game. It's a very smooth, I haven't run into many game-breaking bugs yet. There's a few issues that we'll talk about in a second, but I want to go over sort of the good stuff first. Just before we do that, I'll explain a little bit of the game. Basically, there's 2 teams, 5 players on a team, where you can do, multiplayer against other people, or you can do, 5 players against a bot and whatnot. Basically, there's 2 teams of 5 players, and there's a bunch of points along the map that you try and control, and each team has a guardian, this massive beast at one end. I think there's a snake and an eagle or a griffin. Basically, either team has a guardian. The goal is to kill the other team's guardian, and then you win. Obviously, there's all kinds of different heroes, but there's also these points, and this is what I think makes the game really cool. There's these points all along the map, A, B, C, D, E, F, blah, blah, blah. They are named by letters, and basically, you can go and control these points and summon creatures that help you in your game. There's 3 different creatures you can summon, one of which heals you, one of which will attack the other team, and one of which will reveal any enemies on the map that attempt to go past it. So there's this really cool dynamic of setting up your different creatures in different zones around the map, and I imagine once game's out for a little bit, maybe there's a competitive mode, you might see some really strategic placements of that sort of stuff. So it's a really cool concept. It's a bit different than sort of the other games. Paladins and Overwatch sort of base themselves around sort of a payload transfer, whatnot. This game is very almost MOBA-esque in that the goal is to kill the other team's guardian, and you have to play a bunch of objectives to get to that point. Basically, the different points I was talking about where you can summon these creatures, the game will say attack one of theirs, defend one of yours, and if you're successful, the opponent team's guardian is vulnerable to attack for a small amount of time. If you get its health bar down in that amount of time, you get some points. I think if you kill the other team's guardian 3 times in those little windows, you win the game. But during that window where the opponent guardian, you can attack it and it has a health bar, basically the other team can defend it. And it's a really cool, dynamic game, and the way they designed it, you're just always in action. It's non-stop action, non-stop fighting, and it's really neat. It's a really cool experience. It's sitting at 7 out of 10 on Steam, 4 out of 5 on Microsoft, or 8 out of 10. So the scores are pretty good. It's mostly positive on Steam. And I gotta say, it's pretty neat. It's very action-packed. It's non-stop action. The maps are actually very large, and they're actually dynamic because they actually change throughout a map depending who's winning and stuff. So there's this really cool dynamic of the map changing and the map being very large. But the way they designed the game, the movement is incredibly fluid, especially considering the game just came out. I haven't really run into any bugs. There are some issues with the game that we'll talk about in a second, but it's very fluid to move around. It's very fast-paced, and you're always involved in action unless you're sort of just running around your base. But there's a lot of action happening all the time, and spawn can be a little difficult if you die sometimes. I think if your teammates die, it adds onto your spawn counter, which kind of sucks, but you're back in pretty quick. The longest I've ever had a death counter, I think, was 17 seconds. So it's not, the minute that you can wait in LoL or anything. So it's very action-packed, it's very dynamic, it's very fast, but it feels very fluid. There's not a lot of choppiness or anything, which is really cool. The maps, really well designed. They feel really good. I've only actually played 2 maps in all my time. I don't know if there's more maps, and I just have never gotten them in an unlucky way. But the 2 maps I played, very beautiful and very well designed. They play really smoothly. And because it's such a fast-paced and movement-based games, there's a lot of cool, you just have a sliver of health and you just duck around the corner and get away. There's a lot of really cool stuff, and it creates a really fun atmosphere around the game. And you can't really look away for a second or else you can lose. It's very high energy. I will say though, because of the way the game's designed, some games can actually be really long. You know, if you're playing a team that's really balanced and you get a couple defends on your own Guardian or they get a couple defends on theirs, I've been in games that are 45, 50 minutes, which is kind of a downer. One thing I kind of like about Overwatch or Paladins is that I can, you know, if I have 15 minutes, I can play a game. This is not that. There's not really that casual 20, 10-minute experience. It can be a 45-minute experience, and that kind of sucks, but it can also be pretty cool, because the one time I was in a 45-minute game, it was crazy competitive right to the very end, and it was awesome. But let's talk about some of the issues with the game. I've talked about some of the good stuff with the game. The art style is beautiful as well. I really love the way it looks. It's fast-paced, it's fun, it's energetic. There's some issues with the game. I've only been in 2 maps, which could be an issue. I don't mind the maps. They're actually very good for replayability, but I've only played 2 maps. The balance issues are pretty bad. There's some pretty serious balance issues, and maybe that's a case of not many people having all the characters unlocked. There's a rotating hero champion character. There's rotating weekly or whatnot, so there's a different set of free characters you can play. You can pay about $30 to unlock all the characters. They have a founder's pack or whatever you want to call it. But essentially, you rotate characters, and maybe it's just the characters that are unlocked right now, but there's a definite balance issue between the characters. There's some characters that you get, and you just know you're going to have a bad game because they just don't play well. There's other characters like the robot, HK202 or whatever his name is. He's basically this robot with a machine gun. You really need a good one of him on your team or you're not going to win. He basically can damage from very long range, and he's really good. He's got a ton of health. You kind of need him on your team to be decent, to have a chance to win in the current form. But, I mean, all of these hero-based games go through so many balance issues. You know, Overwatch, it seems like weekly there's a new character that everyone's playing because it's hard to balance these games, and right now the balance issues actually are pretty good for launch right now. I will say that. It's pretty good for, like, a launch, but there's some issues with it. There's also sort of an awkward thing that happens if people leave games, and this is something that I've caught a few times. People leave games. There's not a penalty for leaving a game early. You can just hop into another game right away. At least that's what I've noticed. I tried it once, and I felt like a jerk, but I got right into another game right away. So there's no penalty, and there's not a rebalance when people leave the game. So there was a couple games where somebody would leave, 2 people would leave, and it'd be 5-on-3 for a little bit. There was one game that was 5-on-3 for about 5 minutes before it picked 2 random people to come back in. So that's kind of an issue with no penalties or rebalancing. It can be a little tricky. Again, that may just be sort of the new game thing. But yeah, there's not too many negatives for a game that just came out that looks like this. It's a very good game. It's a lot of fun. If you're into the hero shooter and you're looking for something really fast-paced, it almost has like the original Quake-like feel, where it's just you're continually moving, and there's a lot of 5-on-5 team fights, which is really cool. It's very action-packed, and because of the sort of objective style of play, sometimes these 5-on-5 team fights are just crazy, and you know, your Guardian opens up and you're sitting there just trying your best to defend your Guardian, and it can turn into just these absolute crazy fights, which again have all kinds of animation stuff going on, but the game runs so smooth that it just works. So, yeah, I'd recommend trying it. I mean, it's free to play. There's no harm in downloading it. This was sort of my take on Gigantic. I'd give it, I don't really want to give it a score, but I think it's really fun. I think it's a really, actually, very good game, and it's a bit different than everything else in the genre that I've played, which is really cool. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think of Gigantic down in the comments below if you've played it, if you haven't played it. It's really neat. I'd recommend checking it out if you're into sort of those fast-paced third-person shooters, or just MOBAs or shooters in general. It's a really fun one. And yeah, let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Let me know what you think about this type of video. It's not something I do tremendously often, but every now and again, if there's a game I kind of want to talk to you guys about, maybe. And subscribe for more of whatever it is that we do on this channel. A lot of building games, I guess. Anyway, I'll catch you guys next time. A ciao!